Today, there was an incredible Nintendo Direct that featured a bunch of extremely exciting announcements about the Switch 2, including its official release date. And a few days ago, there was also a separate Nintendo Direct for the Switch 1, which included a 3-minute deep dive into Pokémon Legends Z-A. And let me just say that we are living in a golden age for Nintendo at the moment. In addition to the Switch 2 being confirmed as 4K in docked mode, and with a whole host of amazing looking new games from Nintendo themselves and from third-party publishers, we also found out that some Switch 1 games will have Switch 2 editions, including Legends Z-A. Plus, a GameCube Virtual Console app with Pokémon Colosseum and XD Gale of Darkness coming soon has been officially revealed. So I've got a lot of content to make, and very soon we'll be having a lot of fun when the Switch 2 launches on June the 5th. And there will be hands-on events, meaning the internet is going to be able to see and understand how a Switch 2 actually works and functions, along with a load more details about the system. Crucially though, this means Pokémon Legends Z-A really was designed for the base Switch, and I think this has a lot of implications for Gen 10 and other potential upcoming Pokémon titles in the next couple of years. But in today's video, we're going to be focusing on Legends Z-A and the details that both of the Nintendo Directs have revealed. In the Switch 2 Direct, it was confirmed that Z-A will have a Switch 2 edition, something I'd seen fiercely debated in the comment sections on my last few videos, and something I'd personally hoped would be the case. Again, I think this was definitely designed with the Switch 1 in mind, but probably at some point during its development, Game Freak likely got its hands on the Switch 2 dev kit, and as a result, there is a version that's been optimized for the new console. Now, if you watch the Switch 2 edition clips of Z-A on a device that supports high frame rate, like 60 plus, you can definitely notice the game is running smoothly and looks clean. And just seeing a main series Pokemon game that runs that smoothly is kind of incredible. However, I still think a lot of the assets used are Switch 1 level. So whilst it's clean, I don't think it's going to blow us away visually just yet. I think Gen 10 and beyond will have even more of a built-out high-res feel. Interestingly, it seems if you own the Switch 1 version, you'll have to pay a fee for an upgrade pack, which is perhaps one of the only things that I have a slight gripe with. I can kind of understand the financial argument that if two versions were simultaneously developed, they need to earn back on that dev time. But honestly, they'll sell lots of both versions anyway, so I'm not entirely sure it's necessary to charge for it if the game is literally just a visual upgrade with no new features. And it's worth noting how competitors have navigated this sort of generational upgrade in the past. PlayStation, for example, tend to release their games in both current gen and last gen versions for several years after a new console launches. So if you have a PS4 right now, you can still buy new games, but then crucially, if you upgrade to a PS5, you can usually download the PS5 version for free when you log into your PSN account if the developer supports it. What I think this does tell us, however, is that Game Freak deployed the same development team, or at least the same engine as Scarlet and Violet, to develop Legends Z-A. The fact that Z-A is contained inside one single city, for example, seems to indicate that for this particular release window, i.e. the remake window of Generation 9, they didn't go above and beyond, spending tons of resources and development power on this game. Instead, they just focused on making another game in the Scarlet and Violet engine, and refining it where they could. Hence why the game looks similar to Scarlet and Violet, but just slightly better visually. That's not to say it won't be a great game or that this isn't well thought through, but in terms of scale, it looks contained. An intentionally small scale and somewhat experimental game where the emphasis is more on a new battling mechanic, exploring a 3D Lumio city and hopefully giving us some new Gen 6 lore, rather than rebuilding an engine from the ground up and improving every aspect of the visuals whilst still being Gen 9. And a very similar approach was taken with past remakes. Fire Red and Leaf Green, Heart Gold and Soul Silver, and Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire all looked similar to the original Gen 3, 4, and 6 games respectively, with slight changes in UI and execution. And that's what we're seeing here too. When each of those remakes got released, each time, Game Freak were working on more meaningful upgrades for next-gen titles in the background, all of which were eventually considerable jumps up for their time. Gen 3 to 4 made a massive improvement to 3D looking models with the DS touchscreen and Wi-Fi features as well. Gen 4 to 5 added animations in the battle screen, which at the time was a huge deal, and the list goes on. And crucially, I think this means that Game Freak are putting all their efforts right now into making sure that Gen 10 comes out totally optimized for the Switch 2. clean, running well, and with considerable visual and quality of life enhancements. The Switch 1 era, and Scarlet and Violet in particular, I think made Game Freak realize that they can't just upscale their approach to handheld games, where everything is very linear. Let's Go and even Sword and Shield had very linear routes and cities outside of the wild area, and Legends Arceus and Scarlet and Violet have very clearly tried to evolve things into a more expansive, open-ended 3D adventure with more unique experiences player to player. But arguably, they haven't quite got it right yet, and rush development in Gen 9 made the reviews and reception suffer. Game Freak still has a comparatively small development team, considering their games are the backbone of the biggest intellectual property in the entire world. But we do know that there are different dev teams working on different projects simultaneously, so we can hope that they're taking Gen 10 very seriously and have their best team working on it for a 30th anniversary announcement in 2026. So hopefully they're gonna pull out all the stops for it. But let's talk about the trailer for Z-A itself and what was revealed. The biggest reveal was the day and night mechanic. Lumiose in the daytime will be this peaceful, bustling place with wild zones scattered around, set up as part of the redevelopment plan by Quasartico Inc., meaning you can go in and catch Pokemon from the streets to the rooftops. But when night falls, the parameters of the zones turn red, and it's said that the aura of the city changes. During this time, Pokemon trainers roam the streets and occupy battle zones, and in those battle zones, you can now actually ambush trainers, meaning you can sneak up and attack their Pokemon, because every trainer seems to have one partner Pokemon roaming alongside them out of its Pokeball. This gives you an advantage in battle, though we don't know yet whether other trainers can ambush you and get the same effect. When it comes to Pokemon trainer battle etiquette, this new mechanic seems rather unethical, and is definitely going to make for a brutal dog-eat-dog atmosphere as you traverse the streets of Lumiose during the nighttime. Now, I know the older generation of Pokemon fans have been asking for more adult themes, and I'm not entirely sure this is what they meant, but it could work very well. Again, we see emphasis that this really is a live atmosphere, where the emphasis during battle is on timing your moves in real time and having reflexes, as well as strategy, which is much different to the usual leisurely pace that Pokemon players are used to, picking moves strategically and having time to think about your choice. It builds on the element of live danger and having your wits about you that was presented in the first Legends game, and during the build-up for Legends Arceus, that was something that was heavily marketed, so I think this is just the next evolution of that danger concept, and I do think this supports the idea that the Legends series is more geared towards, yes, building on lore, but also serving the adult players some cool, less kid-friendly themes. I think it's also possibly inspired by the Blood Moon event that happens in the latest Zelda games, which, if you've played those games and experienced that event, it does create this jarring sense of danger and an intense atmosphere, which could be very cool to see in the Pokemon world. And of course, we learned the meaning, or at least one meaning, of the Z-A part of the title. Z to A is the progress of your battle rank. This whole nighttime battle culture in Lumiose is part of an orchestrated tournament of sorts called the Z-A Royale. Each trainer starts at rank Z and has to work their way up to rank A, and we don't know who orchestrated this. We just know that trainers have been invited to participate. Quasartico Inc. seems a likely candidate, and clearly somebody is trying to filter out the strongest trainers, presumably for a higher purpose, maybe taking on a threat or resolving some sort of problem with an almighty strong legendary Pokemon, or even perhaps for someone to use to their own advantage. Considering Mega Evolution is a major highlight here, I wouldn't be surprised if Mega Mewtwo or Rayquaza were involved, as well as potentially a new Pokemon or threat in general. Also, notice how the Royale trainers shown to us have names that begin with Z and Y, possibly indicating their rank. And though this is completely speculative, some people have pointed out that it's possible each trainer will have names with the first letter correlating to their rank. I personally hope this isn't true, and honestly, I would quite like the trainers to be randomized, but following this pattern would mean that AZ could be in rank A, and it could mean that he's the one behind the search for strong trainers, but that remains to be seen. Though we've already discussed in my last video that the look of this game is disappointingly very similar to Scarlet and Violet, I do think some of the cutscenes look good, and the colours seem to be popping more in general. There are definitely still signs of lackluster asset development like flat window details, bad digging animations, and no anti-aliasing. But again, maybe this is due to alleged limitations of the Switch 1, and hopefully more attention on developing whatever Switch 2 games are upcoming. With that being said, the UI looks great and the game seems to run well, and if the real-time battling function works well and has variability, where a few moves aren't OP and you can actually strategize to some degree, I think Z-A is going to be a great game. But what do you think? Is there anything I've missed, and do you like the look of the game after the latest trailer? Let me know all your thoughts down below, and until next time, love you gang.